I'm just going to introduce myself. So I'm Lily. I work at Prolific on the marketing team, and Prolific is a platform to find participants for research. And it's great to hear that you've been using us for your recent research. And I'll just pass over to Casper to introduce himself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Casper. I'm the CEO of LabVanced. LabVanced is a platform for doing online research and creating and running online experiments. My day-to-day job is basically talking to customers, supporting them, and really always happy to hear about the research really that came out, and that's what we're gonna have today. And yeah, so with that, I pass over to Maria.
Hi, I'm Maria. I am a postdoc at the Department of Psychological Medicine and Translational Developmental Neuroscience in Dresden in Germany under Professor Stefan Ehrlich. And we've been doing research on eating disorders, mainly anorexia nervosa. We work very closely with the clinic here, also where our offices are based. And we are really interested in everything that is related to eating behavior.
Okay. And can you talk to us a little bit about the specific questions that you've been looking into, just to bring the research to life?
Yeah, I mean, most of our results are based on our patient samples. So when you look at them clinically and you see them, they're very young. We are recruiting from the child and adolescent psychiatry department. Then you see a lot of cognitive alterations in these patient samples. So when you look at cognitive functioning, like emotion regulation or cognitive control or reward processing, then when the patients are in their acute states of the disorder, you see that these functions are mainly altered. And we are mainly interested in what happens to these alterations over the course of the disorders, how they change maybe when the patients receive treatment. Does the cognitive functions or the alterations persist, or maybe do they recover as they do with their weight, mainly if you look at anorexia nervosa. So this is our main research question. So my specific focus would be like cognitive functions like emotion regulation, whether they are altered or whether the disorder actually leaves some marks or scars when they recovered later.
Okay. And what kind of, I know you mentioned adolescents, but were there any other specific criteria you're looking for when you were thinking about the participants that you need for this research?
Yeah, I mean, one main problem is that you find in psychiatry is that people are just categorized according to a certain diagnosis. And this specific approach has been criticized over the recent years. So we also need to find ways to recruit people where you can find eating behavior on a spectrum, not just people that have a diagnosis and go to the hospital or are hospitalized, but also to look at associations between these cognitive functions and the eating behavior per se. We need also adults and we need people from the broader population, because we mainly recruit from the university. We have, I don't know, thousands of students that are interested in participating as control group, but it doesn't necessarily match what we find in the population out there, which is the reason why we actually started recruiting data online, so we can look at eating behavior on a spectrum rather than at just someone having a diagnosis and finding these alterations.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how many participants did you need for the research?
Well, it depends. And if you look at the literature, because you don't have so much control over what is happening as you have it in the lab. When people do this online on their computers, you need a larger sample sizes than you usually do when we look at experiments that we do in the lab. And also when you go to conferences and you see nowadays that people, that it's mainly everything gets larger, the data gets larger, the questions you want to answer, you need data that is far larger than we can provide with our recruitment in the hospital, because also the prevalence of eating disorders is very low. So we usually recruit for each specific question that we have. For example, we look at something that is interesting in regard to emotional regulation, then we usually would look for something 500 to 600 people for one specific question. That is what, in my opinion, the literature is also recommending, and what we experienced also, that we find very reliable effects.
And is this based, like, are these participants around the world, or are you looking in a particular country?
Yeah, I mean, because our patients from the hospital, they are German, and also the prevalence in eating disorders is mainly women. We usually recruit only female patients to kind of match our patient samples, or have this a bit closer related. Yeah, and they need to be fluent in German, because usually our task designs, they are the same that we do in the lab, and then our patients and also the adolescents, they only speak, or usually just speak German. So also that is a requirement we have from our participants.
And when you embarked on this research, were there any aspects that you thought were going to be challenging, or did find quite challenging in terms of this specific project?
Well, if you look at online research, I think the main challenge is that you don't have, like I said, you don't have any control over what is happening in the home where the participant or our participant is doing the tasks. So we don't really know, are they making a break? Do they eat in front of the computer? Do they actually just click through and answer something random just so they can get some money? And for us, it was also very challenging to sit there and try to think about all the opportunities that can go wrong with the data quality. So what we thought was really important is to make sure that the data we receive is high quality, and what kind of checks can we implement to actually make sure that this is actually the same as we have as we sit behind someone in the lab, and we see that they're actually doing the right thing, or they're able to ask questions if they do not understand anything. So quality checks, and I think making the instructions as easy as possible are the main challenges I can think of.
Yeah, and you specifically chose LabVanced to set up this research. How come you chose LabVanced?
Well, I guess various reasons. First of all, they have a large database of already implemented tasks. And when you do applied research, as we do with patients, you usually look for effects that are already there. I mean, you can also use LabVanced to actually pilot the effect you're looking for, because you don't have large amounts of data to actually make sure that the effect that you look for is actually happening. But you can also use the data or the experiments, task designs they provide, because I don't know, if you look at inhibition, you want a stop signal task, or you're looking for a flanker task, or a Stroop, or an emotional regulation setup. And we thought, since they're already implemented, you can just use the templates and adapt them. And also, I thought it was very helpful that I got the feeling that the support is really responsive. And if we have any specific requirements for a specific task, like it needs to be randomized this way, or the timing needs to be in that way, or we have an event that needs to be followed by this condition, then we experienced that the support was very responsive and helped us to set up the task in the way we wanted. That's the reason. Yeah, also, I mean, I think of that the important thing for us is that everyone can do this on a computer at home. So a browser environment was very important. Nobody needs to install anything. Because we also doing research on mobile phones, and there it's always very complicated with Android and Apple, and here we never experienced with LabVanced any problems that the browser requirements. You can also specify this when you start your research, and it makes it very easy.
You also mentioned, obviously, before that the quality was really important to you, and so it was very important to include certain questions or checks in your study design. Can you talk us through some of the things that you included?
Yeah, well, for example, when you do give them instructions, you can ask questions whether they actually comprehended what they were reading. You do like multiple choice questions, and when they answer the wrong thing, then they either have to do the whole practice session again, or you give feedback that they've answered wrong. So this is, well, I guess the most basic one. We also, in a recent task, we also implemented reaction time thresholds, which means if they don't respond in a certain time window, and if they do this more than 10 or 15% of the trials that our task includes, then the task just breaks off and the participant cannot complete the task, because this kind of data is then of no use for an analysis. And also you can, in questionnaire data, for example, it's very important to avoid people just always pressing the middle or the very left or the very right, that you have questions that include something like, please answer with not agree, or please answer very much. So you are actually making sure that these people read the question and then answer the right thing. I mean, this is just a proxy in the end. You cannot be 100% sure, but we always exclude, I don't know, maybe 2%, 3% of the data, just because at least some people can be filtered by that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the reaction time test, was that something that LabVanced specifically enabled?
For us, yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Cool. And then you've talked a bit about the kinds of participants that you were looking to recruit as well, and you use Prolific as your platform to recruit those participants. Can you tell us a bit more about why you chose Prolific?
Well, because it was a recommendation of LabVanced, first of all. And second of all, also, it has a large database of German speaking. I mean, I found it very convenient that you can just look up how many people in the language you are interested in are actually registered in the database, and you can potentially send an offer to take part in our experiment. Yeah, I think that was the main reason, because if you're interested in recruiting the wide public, you need a lot of registered users that you can potentially approach. Sometimes we are also thinking about filtering according to specific symptoms, for example, like disordered eating behavior. And then it's very important that if you're interested in 500 people, that you approach at least 5-6 times that many to make sure that you can answer your research question properly.
Yeah.
Can I maybe just say something to that? So I think because we also helped a little bit with setting things up on Prolific for some of your tasks, right? And I think one of the things that connect everything is that because data quality is so important, one of the things that you can do on Prolific, right, is that you can, well, if the participant didn't complete the task at all, then you could, well, either you could cut some of the compensation, and because it's not only us that has been doing that, like for this research, but this has been done before. There's this kind of incentive of people to really produce good data, like so because we tested out also for LabVanced, we run research for some of our users, and we tested out different platforms. And I think what's really important is this incentive to give good data, because some of the platforms don't. Basically, no matter what data comes out, you always have to pay the full amount. And even if, as Maria said, let's say participant always there's a reaction time task and they never respond, or they respond in only half of the cases, which is pretty random then. Like if there's a clear incentive to say, okay, like you only get a fraction of the payment or whatever, then very clearly this helps long term on the data quality side a lot. So I think this is really, really important. And yeah, I think the large sample size and the transparency of the sample sizes is really good, together with the pre-screen, with all the other pre-screeners that are there. And of course, also that it's, well, really easy to integrate with LabVanced. Basically, it just copy and paste 2 links to each other, and that's it. So it's also very convenient and fast.
Well, I think for us, I mean, the gender and age filtering possibilities are the most important that we have. And I think when you talked about the money, this is also very important to us because, I mean, we could potentially just use the Labvanced link and send it to everybody we know, or we send a link to people on a university list or something, but it doesn't help us with what makes Prolific very convenient, and this is the payment system, that it's very transparent and convenient for us, that we, and this is what we potentially pay for, that we do not have to go through all the details with account numbers or agreements to receive the money. So we just upload the money and then the participant receives whatever we want them to receive. I find this is also one of the very big pros.
And if I can add a second point, because I think there was a study, because I should also say that, so we have been working with Maria and Stefan in their lab for quite a few years now. And I think one of the recent studies, and I think it's not concluded, was also a longitudinal study, or a part of a longitudinal study, and it was, so I think both Prolific and Labvanced are really a great match here, because longitudinal research is not something that is, very easy right from the start. You need to consider quite a few things. You need to re-identify the subject. Nevertheless, of course, data privacy had to be preserved. Many other things. The payment has to be considered. How does it work with, let's say, payment for the first session and for the second session? How does that work? They should get automated, or it should be very easy for the subject to be reminded that there is a second session, or a third session, or the fourth session, and there might be only a certain time window. So let's say the first session can start whenever, but then the second session has to be like a week later. But let's say between 7 days and 9 days, but not 2 weeks later. So this kind of technology is implemented in Labvanced and makes it very nice to get these automated emails out there to the participants, to get the anonymous detection of the subject. But it also really works quite well with Prolific, so that we can re-identify the subject there and pay them, in this case using the bonus payment feature to pay people for these longitudinal studies. So I think that was also a good reason to use, in a way, both systems. And
I think we had a very specific case where I thought this was also very convenient, where we wanted to screen for something. And I think this was like Android mobile phones, because the platform we're using for ecological momentary assessment doesn't go well with iPhones. So we needed only participants that had an Android phone, and then asked these specific participants to do the continuous part of or longitudinal part of our research. And this was also where we realized that Labvanced and Prolific work very well together, because then only the Android users were re-invited and could potentially complete the tasks.
Amazing. Oh, thank you for adding so much color to that. That was really helpful for getting into the weeds of the research. And you did mention quality. I mean, do you remember how much of your sample you kept at the end, or like how many of the responses you were happy with and didn't need to replace?
So for the last study, I remember, because we are currently also sitting on the publication, that it is kind of a pilot study. It's one of these cases where we use Labvanced to make sure that the effect we're interested in is actually there. So the sample size was a bit smaller. I think we had like 200 or 210, and 89 actually stayed in the sample that we could use for analysis. So I think that is a very good outcome.
Amazing.
In terms of the quality. Yeah, this includes all the checks that we spoke about.
Yeah, and obviously with a longitudinal study, retention is really important as well. So I don't know if you can remember roughly how much of the sample retained through the different steps.
No, I mean, I don't remember how many Android users were there. I mean, I guess this also depends a bit on certain demographics and also like kind of how wealthy someone is. And I don't remember. I mean, maybe there were 50 people who actually completed the ecological momentary assessment, but I don't know how many of them we invited. So yeah.
Okay, no worries. Thank you. Awesome. And do you have any advice, like if someone was in your position, they're considering using Labvanced and Prolific together, would you have any like keywords of wisdom or anything?
I mean, I think I can only repeat what Casper said. It is a very powerful combination. And if you are interested in large sample sizes, and if you're ready to think about very thoroughly what kind of quality checks you need to implement to ensure data quality, I don't see any disadvantage to lab-based research. I think you need to make sure that whatever noise you still have in the data needs to be compensated by a large sample. And I think the possibilities of what you can investigate, like the combination of lab-based research and data that is actually from daily lives of participants in their environment, that are far more real than when you invite them and they are very excited or nervous because they're in a lab or in a hospital, at least when it comes to our research. I mean, there's also noise that you have there. So I think it's a very good opportunity to add to our clinical research questions. I think also the combination is really powerful, and I would highly recommend using both.
Oh, thank you. And I'd love to talk a bit about like the key findings from your research. Are there any findings you can share?
I mean, we have a few publications that came out that used Labvanced, and it always added to our knowledge about how cognitive processing and eating disorder actually goes together, how cognitive control relates to habitual behavior, and how habits in our daily lives then relate to either pathological eating behavior or like diet behavior. And our recent study, for example, about the emotional regulation, this was more of a validation. We were really happy to see that the effect we were interested in, it's like a choice effect between choosing between different emotional regulation strategies that has been previously just found in when you look at emotions that were induced with static pictures. We validated this now with video, like more ecological valid material. And we are very happy that what we expected was actually in the data, and hope that we can use this kind of findings then to go on with our further research questions. We started recently to all pre-register our studies that we are doing. And yeah, the final result is usually always a planned publication in one of the journals that our area or the child and adolescent psychiatry department.
Amazing. I'd love to, if you could share those links with me, that would be amazing. I'll definitely share them with the team as well. Awesome. Casper, do you have any other questions that you wanted to cover?
I think this is really extensive and really, really helpful and really interesting to cover that breadth and yeah, I mean again, with Maria and the whole team, we have been working together for so many years, and it was really, really interesting throughout the years. Also see the breadth of the research that you do, and the sample sizes you're going for, and yeah, also going with the, I would say, technological advancements. Step by step, in this case, for instance, using longitudinal studies and like anyway using kind of phone app situation there. So there's I think yeah, we'd really love to continue working with you guys, and really happy to also see your publications. I'm actually following what you're doing, because that's really also always a good outcome. Yeah, so I don't have any questions. I think just congratulations on the great work, and yeah, I'll happy about that.
Yeah, thank you so much, and it's been so lovely chatting with you today. Do you have any closing remarks, Maria, or are you good?
No.
Okay.
Thank you for interviewing me, and it was nice to share that, or to see that someone is interested in actually this kind of research and promotion. And yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thanks, Maria.